as it says up behind me, if I can hand over the keynote speaker and welcome Geoff Thomson MBE and leave the rest of it up to him.
Is anyone twittering over the next hour or for the remainder of the day? Is anyone connected to the wider social media world? No, it's not a trick question, it's just a simple answer. I've got to be careful what I say, because so much of what you say doesn't remain within the confines of any given environment. So my 18-year-old has shown me what I need to do. So I'm just about to connect. And then I'll begin. Good morning, everyone. When I was asked to contribute to the Glasgow 2014 Legacy Forum, it provoked a number of thoughts between my ears as to what that would look like, how it could possibly mean or add value to the consistent effort, which was considerable, which had much more momentum than the previous games I'd become involved in by way of bidding and hosting, and more importantly, how could it become, if by way of Ian's reference to a unique opportunity, added value and sustainable. And by way of some small personal footnote, my relationship with Scotland over the last 35 years, firstly as a competitor, when being different was certainly another excuse to possibly have to fight my way out of Glasgow, I realised that a few smiles meant that I could be actually welcomed rather than getting to the station today. How you doing, big man? And I always welcomed that particular label because at the end of the day, so much is about what we look like, where we come from, what we sound like, and what we believe in. So you'll have noted I'm not from around your part of the world, but I'm part of a bigger community sport. But I want you to really expand your interpretation, your experiences of sport, because it is not just about the winning. I think that's pretty much taken care of within the very advanced plans that were launched last week. But I think the unique timing of this forum was one of the main reasons why I felt I had to contribute. In the space of 2 weeks, we have looked at a one-year milestone of the games that took place in London and looked at the legacy impact that was being affected both economically, socially, culturally, and by way of young people and community. And at the same time in the north, in Glasgow, the one-year countdown began to the 2014 Commonwealth Games. And I looked at the unique timings almost of a legacy baton transfer into an exciting opportunity and a unique opportunity. Everything by way of a narrative has to reflect the previous activity and opportunities of the past, the challenges and what they present to the present. And why we're here today is to see what that present can look like and how it can add value and momentum to see how more effective, efficient, cohesive and sustainable our legacy activity is. By way of my footsteps in sports administration, sports politics, in 1993, in Manchester's Olympic bid then, there was an opportunity born out of a tragedy in the streets of Moss Side, not too dissimilar to the many underdeprived communities that reflect so many urban and growingly suburban and rural communities. The area of Moss Side saw sport for all become sport for a very, very few. And the shooting of a 14-year-old schoolboy, Benji Stanley, saw me go back on the streets, launch a youth charter, and the audience you see to my left was not very much significantly a reflection of what's facing me today, or the audience that's here today. Multi-agency stakeholders, all having a passion for how sport, in its broadest social and cultural potential to engage young people in the wider community, could give an opportunity to develop in life. And at that particular time, the scroll, backed and supported by the then bid team, was about simply going back into our communities and giving them hope. But how does Glasgow 2014 become a truly sustainable legacy for all? Because the Youth Charter's relationship with Glasgow and Scotland is equally a long one. By way of 1994, and working through a timeline of 97, the Commonwealth Heads of Government, Building a Nation Through Sport, where we were looking at South Africa and the post-apartheid era and the role that sport would play, and shared with Commonwealth for the first time a conference that would look at sport as a social vehicle of change in the human and development of communities. By way of moving on, the Commonwealth Games saw the Youth Charter deliver a youth culture and community strategy, bringing 10 communities and 1,000 young people with the gift of tickets that meant they were earned actually create an inspired aspiration as they return back to their communities with that immeasurable outcome, hope. And they decided that they would replicate the Moss Side experience and try and take things forward that reflected their particular environment and their particular experiences. In East Kilbride in 2003, I shared Citizenship in Action as a legacy and came back this year, 10 years on, to share what had happened and what could happen within your host city. Our approach was simple. 3 phases: to engage young people with all of the activity, and that's not just sporting, it's artistic, it's anything that will get them to become more hooked, more engaged, and more motivated. Because the motivated aspect became the facilities. I realised that there were so many facilities, but so few of them allowed young people access. Were they fit for practice? Were they fit for purpose? And did we have the language, the culture, and that youthful exuberance to be able to keep up with them? Because many of us, I'm sure, would freely admit that it's not how old you are, but it's how young you feel that determines how you're able to keep up with them and how they keep up with you. Because we learnt so much that they had much to show us as we could share with them. But what we then inspired was the ability for communities to help themselves, to do it for themselves, and to deliver and sustain it for themselves. We did that with a community campus, a simple model used within the regeneration and renewal strategies. They allowed us the ability to deliver policy outputs and outcomes that, yes, hit the targets, but were a lot more about the outcomes that would lead to employability and enterprise. Because what I want to suggest to you today is we engage and motivate our young people and communities at risk of creating so much hope and inspiration. If it is not aspirationally sustainable, we have created a false hope, a false glass ceiling, and there could be even more disaffection once the games have gone. Because that is a reality. The games will go, but what is left will depend on the planning, preparation, and partnerships that are established. That community campus was to be developed by the South African model, inspired by the late apartheid champion Steve Biko, who believed that community model of empowerment and tools that could sustain and manage their own projects and programs was the only way to truly provide inclusion, involvement, equality, diversity, and the ability to have a pride that was local as it was global. As I said, in 2002, it was all pretty special. But bringing people from different backgrounds, different identities, beliefs, cultures, and locations can have its own challenges as well as its opportunities. And I found that in travelling to each of those communities, we had to have a model that was flexible, but at the same time clear in its ability, in my humble opinion, the experience of the last 20 years, as to how the bidding, hosting, and legacy of major games can actually impact on the areas of education, attainment, behaviour and performance, healthy activity and lifestyle choices, therefore leading to a civil society that is safer and that can address the more challenging injustices of antisocial behaviour, extremism and gang culture. But then more importantly, with that all-important link with the wider community, a responsibility for all where the climate is as fresh and as engaging as it can be aspirational. Shona Robertson actually made the quote that I think best reflected the opportunity that you have and the uniqueness of that opportunity. Equally, I'd like to reflect on a very, very unique Paralympian who'd already overcome adversity socially to be able to excel and win gold. And I think the word legacy is the most overused word at this present moment in time, as is inspiration. They're words that need to be translated into action, and that action needs to see a debate, a discussion, a dialogue, to coin a phrase that Ian has now added to my vocabulary, a do-it culture. Because it's the doing it that will actually reflect why we're here, how we can make a difference, when that is delivered, and more importantly, why. Because the why is in everything, and how it's done properly will determine the quality of what you are and how you do it. The framework, and this is where the slight need to make things more effective and cohesive by way of why I've been certainly having a consultation since the April conference of the sports development movement, was to see how those legacy linkages could be provided. with the 2014 Legacy Team, the Glasgow Legacy Effort, and the local organising committee Legacy Effort. And I felt there was a need to make things more integrated, more cohesive. And whilst Glasgow have a clear key theme to their framework of legacy, the accessible, inclusive and active element is what I'd like to hope we can focus on. Because I do believe then that what is prosperous, what is international, in acting, thinking and delivering locally, can then be part of a global community. And in 2 weeks, you will have the Commonwealth sports development community coming here to see how things can be improved and be made better for the Commonwealth family. I've had a go at trying to put it all together in one slide and in one graphic. That's what the dialogue, debate and discussions of late have produced. Something that might well be, by way of a legacy framework, a deliverable model that would identify some of the key multi-stakeholder relationships and might identify for you some additional thoughts as to how your contributions today might add value and make that model more robust, more efficient, more effective and more sustainable. But it all offers itself and delivers within itself the ability to allow flexibility, interconnectivity, the transfer of best practice, the communication. In a multimedia communication age, I still think we can communicate more effectively, more efficiently, and get the message across to those who may not feel they have an opportunity to be engaged. Stuart Harris, at the Sports Development Conference, left an empty slide and challenged us as the delegates to come up with a community model that might be fit for practice and fit for purpose. The community sports hubs are now well established throughout Scotland. But what does the community sports hub look like in East House, the East End of Glasgow? How will that deliver all that we would like to see? The regeneration and renewal of our communities have to have something that sees what happens here possible in what's happening in the East End of London and New East Manchester. Isn't it strange the word East features in each of the previous bidding, hosting and legacy cities? But that is where I believe there is a very important link within the last 20 years of past and present being here today and presenting to you and what you will contribute for the remainder of today. Prior to the Commonwealth Games, to the Paralympic opening ceremony, there was a gathering of the Commonwealth community. I was there on crutches because I had a hip replaced. Sport can be very bad for you, ladies and gentlemen. But on my crutches, I was to discover that it was a Commonwealth community already looking at what the Olympic and Paralympic Games might do. They were looking at digital inclusion. The realisation that in Africa, education and health and social and civil order were already being communicated through smartphones. 90% of Africans now have one. They don't use PCs anymore, and it's already improving social enterprise, women's rights, the ability to have safer communities, and even trade for fairer prices that will see an economic benefit impact the social and cultural benefit. It's seeing young students who leave their villages and go to their cities able to simply transfer money back to their families with a simple double click of their thumbs. But in that, there was a plan. The plan was presented and is now being shared with many communities and cities, urban, suburban and rural. You have an interesting challenge. I mentioned it in April. You have 50,000 enthusiastic people who want to contribute to your games. You only need 15,000. It's a 35,000 golden opportunity. How will you make use of it? How will you be able to apply it so that every community in Scotland is able to gain something or realise something that sees a legacy for all achievable? I also wanted to leave with you a definition of legacy. And as I've said, legacy means different things to different people. But I hope that this will give you something to think about and challenge you as you go into your workshop sessions. Because it is about challenging and establishing from your personal and professional knowledge, experience, wisdom, how we can make a very, very unique exchange of ideas today add value to the existing effort. There are legacy milestones, in my view, and legacy development goals. These will all be terms that you will hopefully see in the future help shape and give policy the all-important quality of feedback so that the limited resources can be used more effectively and more efficiently. Because I always believe that recessions focus the mind. They make us more innovative. There are significant challenges from the feast of the last 13 or so years to the famine that is likely to befall us. But I do believe that the regeneration and renewal and how major games are used to improve the quality of life in young people and communities and society as a whole is a real and tangible opportunity. But it still has its challenges. So within the tools that you will be using in your workshops, I can share with you it's a South African model that was used when I was told that post-apartheid South Africa would not survive, where sport was used to simply create and build bridges that were thought impossible, and where a then President, Nelson Mandela, used sport so effectively and so efficiently as a vaccine, an antidote and a treatment. I was fortunate enough to be part of that extraordinary experience, and at least 3 or 4 times a year the love affair of being called at the 11th hour was simply to see what the challenge was. So coming back here, ladies and gentlemen, was no challenge. Going into communities here was no challenge, because it was nowhere like what I was experiencing in the African continent, and South Africa in particular. But you've seen the legacy milestones. You'll see that I put a Glasgow 2018 Olympic Youth Games. Well, hey, we can't lose it. We can't win everything. But by losing, you're not beaten, because there are so many opportunities that will result from the opportunities that you are now contributing to today. In April, I launched a Legacy Manifesto. It reflected a 2010 Legacy Forum like we're having today. But since April, I've been troubled, because I felt that as Scottish citizens, with your own devolved vision and future, for your own green and pleasant land, what would that look like? So that is why we have today. And the discussions of those who, following that conference, who had the dialogue and the discussions by phone, I'd like to thank you for helping shape what is the opportunity, unique as it is, for you to now contribute and see your own Legacy Manifesto, something that will add value and provide a currency of hope. As I said, in 2 weeks, there was a Commonwealth Sports Development Conference. In 2007, the footprint was laid, because I do believe we need to be humble in our approach and to learn from our Commonwealth partners. The need not to duplicate, because we haven't got the time. The global community moves very, very quickly. That's Benji, just so you know who he is, but he represents so many young lives who will not be at the games, who will not watch the games, and will have been denied an opportunity because of the social disaffection and what I believe to be a lack of sport for all, of arts for all, of cultural opportunity for our young. Because we are all talking our policy, now it is time to deliver on our policy and make it real. There is always a tragedy that inspires an opportunity, and that's what we now have. When Nelson Mandela took the Youth Charter Scroll in 1996 on Youth Day, he got South Africa's sportsmen and women to sign it in St. Petersburg. The scroll was hijacked, believe it or not, and then it was recovered within a week. The streets can do well when they decide to work together. Those have since been locked away and secured in safekeeping. But now this year I've decided that they must be shared. I was hoping they'd be shared in 2 weeks at the Sports Development Conference, but that's work in progress. But as he lies in his sick bed, the philosophy is what I hope will inspire you and challenge you to really look at your challenges, look at your opportunities, come up with your recommendations as to how you see these games uniquely delivering a games and delivering a legacy, as it has over 5 years, for our young people and communities to see an opportunity that will provide for those who least have the opportunity to feast on it. I never recite it, because I've had to so many times, but I leave it as a reminder that everything starts with an all-important tragic step in life, all too often today. And nowadays, it will always be about what you can do, how you can do it, and how you can make the difference. I will be the errant, potential bad boy, as I always was at school, flittering in between your workshops, and if there's not the energy, if it's not challenging enough, I shall be the challenge, I shall be the intense added value, or just simply silent by way of presence. Not intimidating, hopefully not, because having pressure, and we've got limited hours, but I believe the legacy efforts of Glasgow 2014 and everyone involved provides a golden opportunity that will not only benefit the young people and communities of Glasgow and Scotland, but the Commonwealth community as a whole. Thank you for listening. Paul Fletcher will come down and I think there was only one workshop I wasn't able to witness, and I hope I didn't interrupt or provide too much of a contribution to what was, certainly from what my ears were able to hear and I was able to witness and see, was a very healthy exchange of passions, spirit and commitment to a Games that is now literally a year away. Well, we're now into the year. Key messages are what I feel always best summarise a unique gathering of this kind, and the issues by way of challenge and opportunity, as well as suggestions, I think all add value to the current legacy effort. And as I said, Glasgow is unique. It is delivering a Games and it is delivering a legacy opportunity. And I don't think we should underestimate the challenges that presents. But there's more than enough going on out there. And for me, and please correct me if I'm wrong, the key issues that certainly came across was access. And by way of access, that's to facilities, to information, how that information is communicated, how well, as a result of that communication, we can inform, we can implement, and we can actually embed some of the great work and initiatives that are currently in play. I think the communication issue for me is a critical one at all levels. Bottom up, top, bottom, and somewhere meeting in the middle of the multi-agency stakeholder relationships, which again came to my next point, collaboration, partnership, relationships, short-term, mid-term, long-term, because I do genuinely believe that legacy is a 20-year programme. It has, in my humble opinion, a 2, 3, 5 and 10-year milestone of legacy development goals that have to be agreed as one truly collaborative, collective effort. Buy-in, belief, belonging, identity. As I've said, I've had a relationship with Scotland of many years, and Glasgow in particular. Many years back, there was that spirit. It was a warrior spirit. It was something you knew you'd have to raise your bar, either in humour, in commitment, or even for why you were in this city and this country. And I believe these Games can do that. I do, however, believe that we need to give an identity, purpose. I've heard the words hope used. That is something that doesn't cost a lot, but it is priceless. But equally, we need to be careful about the hope that we provide. And are we raising the aspirational bar too high? Is there a reality check that needs to be made by way of expectation? And the fact that we may promise much, but only deliver a realistic offer. The legacy vision is clear in my view. The coordination and how we take it forward is not so clear. And I think that is one of the major questions I'd like you to consider by way of an extraordinary contribution today. Would you see yourselves coming together again in the future? Because I don't think you could do yourselves justice by just one high quality discussion, debate and dialogue, in that you're committed here at a time of year where, certainly from my experience of late, in the time this took to bring together, which was a 10-day cycle, and the interest that was expressed not only by those that were here, but those that couldn't be here, is there is a very, very strong passion, will and spirit that something be realised of a truly sustainable offer. So I just leave that with you as a decision, because the decision that you will make in the Youth Charter Time on a journey, it is your democracy and your choice that will decide what happens in going forward. But the first major question is this something you would want to see continue? I think the discussion amongst ourselves at lower and upper level, I think, is word of mouth. And I still believe that the word of mouth as to what this represents as an opportunity, a legacy opportunity for all, is something that is yet to engage the hearts and minds of Glasgow citizens and Scotland citizens. Again, there are too many mediums of communication for us to not be more smart and clever on how we get that message across. And I don't think it can be left to the agencies and institutions that are responsible for the delivery of the Games. I think 2012 showed that people took ownership, they took responsibility, and they took the brand. I'm told there is a legacy brand. Is that true? There is. Why isn't that embraced? Why isn't that being truly given a currency and an ability to deliver everything that's been discussed today? Why aren't there public and private sector agencies helping deliver that social brand? Because I believe it's priceless in being able to take forward what's being discussed and what's being proposed. A lot was said by way of quotes, and some of them were quite telling. The fact that there is no sense of ownership is the opportunity of how we give ownership, identity, belief and belonging. I didn't know it was happening. These are quotes, but they must challenge us. With all that's going on and all that's been contributed, how can people know it's not happening? There are so many initiatives, it's bound to get the message out. Initiatives are initiatives. Funding programs are funding programs. But again, how is this message not able to engage, motivate and inspire a country that in numbers terms cannot be hard as opposed to the larger conurbations throughout the UK? That's why I was captivated and interested in the Scottish and Glasgow challenge. You have the uniqueness of size. You have the uniqueness of demographic. There is an urban, suburban and rural challenge, but you do have the ability to communicate to all your citizens. Legacy-focused sports. I think, again, sports cannot compete for the numbers of hearts and minds. I think we're going to have to become clever. So why can't racket sports be racket sports? Why can't the water sports be water sports? Why can't the combat sports be combat sports? In athletics, which is a very good example, there are lots of disciplines, but it is athletics. But they're able to offer, what, 20 pastimes? Different body types, different shapes, different abilities. And I think how we pull together some legacy-focused sports might well help us not compete for the same numbers. Because I don't actually think the demographic numbers are there, ladies and gentlemen. I think for this agenda of legacy, inclusion and opportunity for all, we should be working collaboratively. That will create its strength and depth of participation, and then we can start looking about who makes the natural journey to performance and excellence. And the final bit, the all-important bit, I think is people just want to feel wanted and accepted. The Games is a wonderful way of doing that. In order to do that, the one thing that was consistent was how the volunteers are going to help. And I've heard all the questions by way of the challenge as to how we get their data, the timing of that data being released, whether the volunteers would be interested in sport. But the one thing I do want to understand is it's not just about the sport. It's about how we rebuild our communities and how localism and commissioning, which is yet to really happen up here, but the community sports hubs and the social enterprises are ways in which I believe we bring all the skill sets, knowledge and experience that might be available through volunteering. And how does that link into the training, enterprise and employability? A wonderful space, because if we do equip and gain this participation, we're going to have to meet that participation. But wouldn't that be a nice challenge to have? Because one thing I do know, investment requires confidence. And once you've got confidence, anything's possible. And I really do believe there is a hearts and minds requirement here, in that everybody genuinely believes that this Games is in it for them, and they can be part of it. I've heard the north to south, and the east to west, and I thought there was a north-south divide, and I was supposed to be the bloody southerner coming up north. But it seems as though there are always north and south within every city conurbation. But can't this effort break down those barriers? Where's the cross-border working? Talking within Glasgow. There is so much going on. This can't fail, in my humble opinion and experience. In South Africa, delivering the FIFA World Cup, they had no infrastructure. But maybe that was a blessing in disguise, because the volunteer effort kicked in, but it was the Gauteng province, like Glasgow, who actually developed their own volunteer programme and then became the exemplar model. those volunteers are now rebuilding their own communities. I just think we're going to have to come at this differently. So, first challenge, first question, is this forum something that would continue to bring the respective and unique experiences into a healthy, honest debate so that things can be improved and developed for the better? Does anyone have an appetite for another one of these? Or is everyone exhausted their enthusiasm?
I have just one here. I think it's become clear as the sessions went on that this was more Glasgow-centric, in fact, if not North Glasgow-centric, and I can see from some of the passionate community level local viewpoints that were coming forward. I mean, there probably is an advantage in local groups coming together. I think for this, it would have to see. I think the people here would need to see how it sits in as part of Glasgow City Council's legacy plan, because they have a vision and they'll have an idea of how those silos work and how the cross working works as well. So it might be something that, you know, some kind of engagement with Glasgow City Council, just see how they want to play things and how any learning from the north of Glasgow's views might be applied across the other areas of Glasgow as well. It was something interesting from a Scotland-wide plan wise, because what I've taken from this is a need for communication, people to be aware of what's going on out there.
And as I've said, that's what these are meant to do. I will reiterate, since April, the Scottish Sports Development Conference, I've spoken at all levels. And one thing that came across to me was communication and just an integrated, more cohesive approach. And for a nation of this size, and for a city of this size and uniqueness, I struggled as to why that couldn't happen. And then decided that potentially the added value we could bring, if we were looking to how we used volunteers in surplus enthusiasm, was to how that would fit in to the existing structures. And I think the point is well made. The expansion of it, but simply, I think the consideration of that. So that's something that has to be considered and looked at by way of consulting Glasgow City Council and all the representative interests that matter and are important within its delivery. I think certainly from the volunteer effort, there's a lot of work to be done. I think there is a challenge, ongoing, and an opportunity. It is one of the key interests and the reasons I got involved and was asked to be involved. And I still think that it will require all three legacy efforts, both within LOCOG, the City Council and nationally, to see what might be possible, because I fear that that massive opportunity could become surplus to the potential for embedding a legacy opportunity. So again, it presents its challenge, but it presents its opportunity. But time is both our friend and enemy. With regards to the information, the plan is to have this drafted in 7 days and given back to you, so you can see the quality of what you've contributed to. That, in my view, would help the decisions, the debate and the discussions that still need to be made, and provide us with, albeit a northern-centric approach of a city, something that can have a broader input, consideration and dialogue. Would that be agreeable to all in attendance? Tends to work in 7 days. After that, it loses its currency. So that's the challenge of making sure that's given back to you and having the input of things that you feel have been omitted. But I think it'd be a time to acknowledge the facilitators who I think did an exceptional job. It's time we've got to stand up and get embarrassed, I'm afraid.
Oh, I'm just laughing at myself.
No, you were very good. Sometimes you've got to be visibly invisible, something I still have a problem with. So I think Andy, Deborah, Fiona, Paul, Di has gone.
I'm standing here myself. Come
No,
on.
you're supposed to all stand by way of the embarrassment, because this is where you're thanked. Is that just a Scottish thing? Shy. Okay. As I said, when we first muted this idea, it was literally a legacy of the Sports Development Conference. A few faces that are here today then started an ongoing dialogue, and it coincided with the discussions I was having with the legacy team nationally and with LOCOG and a few others. And I felt that we needed to possibly see if we could bring something like this together. And Paul, Andy and others came together, convinced me it was something possibly worth doing. And that was 10 days ago. 10 days ago? And I have to say, even by our own youth charter standards, I thought that might be a tricky one with the time of year and with the demands on everyone's time. I think as a result, I can only say from a very distant supportive role that the role undertaken by A&M training in particular, and I know the emails you will have seen Paul send at the time of night in which he sent them, that there's been an extraordinary effort done on behalf of Scotland, Glasgow and the Games effort, and I think that should be acknowledged at this moment in time. Like everything, it's all about you. 20 years ago we were told that legacy was important and vital. 20 years on, it's still important and vital. All I would say is, please don't sit and wait for it to happen. It's something that has to be continually challenged, reminding people with competing agendas and various demands on time that it is actually possible. In New East Manchester, when I go back down this evening, there'll be a meeting first thing in the morning. We are now 12 years on of a 20-year journey, just about to introduce our youth strategy. It has taken that long, but all of a sudden it has clicked, and when it was least expected, I have to say. And the facts, figures and evidence of truth are very compelling arguments when targets are absolutely required but should never be replaced by the human endeavour and the human spirit. Please continue the effort. Sorry if it has challenged any, but for that, that's a healthy democracy. And I was told up here there's always an honest discussion and a truth. And thank you most sincerely, because you are unique by way of an interesting city legacy journey in this country, and what you do will help change the lives not only of your communities, but in other communities in the sub-region and beyond. If there are any questions, please ask them. I'm glad you're all talked out, discussed or debated out, and I hope our paths will cross at some stage in the future. Thank you very much.